We're selling security, and our customers on day one are household name companies. So I don't have the luxury of starting small with a couple folks and building a little thing in a garage and then having a kind of janky version that goes out and people sort of deal with it. And I promise that it'll work nice in 6 months, right? That is not going to work this time around. And so when I set out to do this and sort of had the idea of what it was we were going to go build, I knew I had to raise 10 to 15 million to hire the kind of senior engineers and expertise and have the time to build a robust product before I launched it.
Welcome to the Inside the Round podcast, where you get to learn about raising capital from founders who have just done it. I'm Helena Fogarty. I'm a fundraising expert who helps startups raise their seed and Series A rounds. Today, I'm speaking with Oren Michels of Barndoor AI. Barndoor is an enterprise security company that secures how AI interacts with your corporate data. Barndoor provides centralized governance and management across all AI access, policy, and visibility. It works with any AI agent, no matter where it runs or how it's built, giving enterprises the flexibility to stay ahead of the rapidly evolving AI landscape. Founder Oren Michels has an incredible track record and has raised in good times and bad. He co-founded Mashery in 2006 and pioneered the API management category during the rise of mobile apps, giving enterprises control over how data moved between systems. Now, Oren is applying that same disciplined approach to the AI revolution. Barndoor AI raised $13.6 million in Series seed funding in May of 2024, led by Crosslink Capital, with participation from Preface Ventures, Precursor Ventures, Angels, and notable angel investors. So let's find out how they made it happen. Oren, thank you so much for coming in today.
Helena, thanks for helping me.
Absolutely. Now, I love the kind of headline that you raised $13.6 million quickly.
It was quickly, yes.
And with an idea. I want to kind of give some context to that.
Okay.
Because one of my toxic traits is trying to figure out how people raise so quickly and trying to understand how and why. Like, what was the secret ingredient?
Well, you raise quickly, but you also spend a career building relationships so you can. So I did that actually when I raised for Mashery as well. So I had started the first startup that I tried to raise money for. We launched 5 days before 9/11. And for 5 days, we were the coolest startup. We were Wi-Fi startup, and Wi-Fi was all brand new. It was really cool. Yeah. And then no one was funding anything overnight. But the VCs all still had jobs, and we all still had companies. And so I was sort of going through the valley shortly after 9/11, 2001, and early 2002, essentially pretending to raise money for this company. Mm-hmm. And the VCs were pretending to listen to my pitch because we all knew they weren't going to write a check. So the stress was completely non-existent because everybody knew what the outcome was going to be. But as a result, I got a lot of practice. Yeah. And I made a lot of relationships. Yeah. And one of those relationships actually is on my board at Barndoor and personally put in a large angel check. So, it began building those relationships in almost 25 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've had a few exits.
Yes, I have.
But not necessarily when you were raising for Mashery.
No. When I raised for Mashery, my Series A, which is what they called them back then. They didn't have Series seed and pre-seed and such. The first money you raised was called a Series A, hence the name, was a $100,000 price round. There were no such things as safes in 2006, led by Josh Koppelman at First Round Capital, and on $1 million post. And that was a fully priced round, and that was our Series A. Yeah. We raised, I think, a total of about $35 million over the course of Mashery's life. And I think we had either 8 or 9 separate closes, an A, an A1, an A2, a B, a B2, et cetera, until we finally, raised the final round that then took us to the acquisition by Intel.
Yeah. So when you're raising $100,000 and it's a Series A and it's a price round, what was the legal bill on that? Do you remember?
So I do, because the legal bill, that was also back in the days when firms, they didn't even just defer the initial, they didn't charge you. Yeah. Right. So the legal bill was zero on that. Nice. I think I got my first legal bill after I finished my A3, by which time we'd raised 1.25.
Yeah. And whereabouts, how much time had passed at that point?
Less than a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did a first close, a second close, a third close.
Yeah.
And then by that time, we then had our first real round about a year later after that.
Yeah. And I love how you're categorizing or really contextualizing going out to raise after 9/11 and a lot of pretending.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that happen more recently.
Oh, haven't we all?
Yes.
Yes.
August 2022.
There you go.
Yes. A lot of pretending, a lot of action,
a lot of pretending.
checks being written.
Yep.
Everyone pulling back.
Yep.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. It was pretty extreme in this one, but yeah.
So when you're looking at raising a price round of $100,000 at that point, how did you keep the company growing?
Well, the company at that point was 4 of us, and one of us was the technical co-founder, and he needed to get paid.
Yep.
And
nothing changes there.
Right, exactly. So some things just do not change. And so the other 3 of us actually began doing consulting.
Yeah.
And we started a little LLC that exists to this day. And we sort of found folks who would pay us to do various random things while we waited, and then eventually had enough money to begin paying ourselves a little bit, and eventually paid ourselves a little better.
Yeah.
And then eventually sold the company.
Nice.
Yeah, but it was we had to figure out how to pay the mortgage, and we did it through finding people who thought we were useful.
Yeah. When we spoke originally via Zoom, fantastic Zoom, you mentioned that your first rodeo was back in the late 90s.
Yep.
With a wine auction company.
Yep.
And that eventually had an exit.
It did.
When was that exit?
Oh gosh, it would have been, I think 2014. No.
Yeah.
2016. So that was within the last. It was post. It was actually past 2014 because I was living in New York. So probably 2016.
Yeah,
I raised the money for that in 1999.
Right.
And I left in 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love how much you've seen. Like you've seen.
No, and the guy who took my job as running it, he was there for the 16 years or whatever it was until the company got sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that exit had not happened when you went out to raise.
No.
For Mashery.
No, but some of the VCs at least heard of the company because a lot of them drink wine.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
So I did have a little bit of knowledge there.
Yeah. So I'd love to, I love just, again, trying to pick together pick apart the fabric to understand the threads that help this happen. Going back to a long time ago, did you always know you're going to be an entrepreneur?
I didn't know that was really a thing, but I also, when I was in junior high and high school, I had started a business doing photography. So I was doing theatrical lighting design and tech directing and such. So I was also the geek who had the camera that I actually worked in a theater setting that had the right lenses and film and such like that. So I was doing all these productions, amateur and semi-pro things, and I would take pictures of the shows and sell them to the performers and sell them to the designers so they'd have them for their portfolio. So I started that. That was my first business.
Yeah. Was that for local productions?
Local productions, local productions, high school productions. But it was I grew up in a college town, so there was also a small community theater and various theater things that came through. So that was my first thing. And then I in college I started a theater company producing a few shows. So, I definitely, when faced with wanting to do something, found myself starting companies more, fairly often. But I didn't really classify it as an entrepreneur really until I knew I was basically unemployable and didn't really have much choice.
When was that?
Probably about the time that I left WineBid and started doing, I'd had a couple jobs. I've been fired from almost every job I've ever had. And so, I realized, particularly running, the company that came before Mashery, and then there was an interim period where I was working for this guy running his company, and then he fired me. And so I realized that it was just not working well. I could be sort of a individual contributor early in my career. I wasn't really even that good at that. But once there was sort of like I was generally running a company for a person or running a division for a person, it usually didn't end well.
I'm laughing and taking great glee at that because as a founder, there have been points where I don't know if I'm completely unemployable.
Yeah.
But I don't think I want to be.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, it's
Yeah.
look, I'm a very loyal person. So when Intel bought my company, I wanted them to succeed very much. They were very generous and they took care of all my entire team and took care of my investors. And it was a great situation, but it was very difficult for me to go from being, the last person who got to decide things to, I think there were 7 levels between me and the CEO.
Wow.
And, it was just a very different situation that I was not accustomed to.
Yeah. Did you find they moved very slow?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they moved slow. There was, I met some great people. In fact, one of the people I met there is a woman who went on to Microsoft as a corporate VP, and she is now on my board at this company. So at Barndoor. So, getting to know her and some other really amazing people who work there. But, you think about a company that makes semiconductors, their whole concept is there can be no mistakes. There can be no failures because you have a mistake in something in the fab and it is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
So the corporate culture is set up to make sure that those things don't happen. We, software startup people don't necessarily think the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot more failure.
On
purpose. A lot more experience.
On purpose.
Like
on purpose,
mistakes being made.
Absolutely.
Experiments happening.
Yeah.
Failure on purpose to learn.
Yeah.
It's a risk tolerance that
Absolutely.
Corporations don't always embrace or understand. You mentioned you have been around the theater a lot.
Yep.
You're currently still involved in that.
I'm still involved. Yeah, I do some producing on Broadway and off Broadway, and I also started another company. During the pandemic, I started a nonprofit helping nonprofit theaters stream theater over the internet so that they could get to their audiences when the audiences couldn't get to them.
Nice. Yeah. Excellent. And we talked about starting the consulting company to pay the mortgage bills.
Yep.
So along the way, creating companies.
Yep.
How much monetary, punishment do you take before you start reaping the rewards? Like, what does that look like often for you?
Well, look, I have a good friend who was, during the period of time I was working at Mashery and running Mashery for 7 years and plus the 2 years at Intel, they had a very nice executive job, not C-level, but just a VP-ish job at a public software company. And I'm pretty sure they made more money during that period than I made doing Mashery. Yeah. But that's fine. I had more fun. Yeah. Right. But it definitely is, if you're successful, it certainly is back end loaded. And it's interesting though, the kinds of companies you start. So at Mashery, we started small. We didn't know we were building an enterprise software company. We thought, I had this situation where I was biz dev guy, a little startup, and I needed an API. And so I couldn't get the stuff I needed. So I started this company and I assumed my customers were going to be other little companies like this. And so it was all very small and I thought the numbers would be fairly small. And then the iPhone happened like 3 months after we started. And then the App Store happened. And suddenly every large company needed an app and that app had to talk to something. And many of the people didn't realize at the time that something was called an API. And so pretty much overnight, it was a New York Times, and I remember sitting with the CTO and the CEO of the New York Times, and they said, look, we need the thing you're building, but you also have to sort of grow up. You have to be able to handle the service level agreement. You have to give this kind of support. But the good news is we're willing to pay you more than you're asking us to pay us. So you can charge us more, and you can, build a better and more robust thing. Yeah. And with that, I went and raised some more money and sort of turned this little startup-y thing into an enterprise software company. So now with Barndoor, it's kind of the opposite. We're selling security, and our customers on day one are household name companies. Yeah. So I don't have the luxury of starting small with a couple folks and building a little thing in a garage, and then having a kind of janky version that goes out and people sort of deal with it. And I promise that it'll work nice in 6 months, right? That is not going to work this time around.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I set out to do this and sort of had the idea of what it was we were going to go build, I knew I had to raise 10 to 15 million to hire the kind of senior engineers and expertise and have the time to build a robust product before I launched it, and to keep the whole thing running and to pay people before we had revenue for a decent period of time. And so I had one VC I loved very much who wanted to lead the round and wanted it to be a $5 million round because that was the size of checks that person wrote.
Right.
And I'm like, look, I can't do this. I won't have a milestone after $3.5 million to go raise the next thing. So I can't take that risk. I need, and frankly, I wouldn't be able to hire the engineers I need to hire if I only had that much in the bank. They're not stupid. Yeah. Right. And so, so I needed to be able to come out and say, I've got enough money to go for a while and hire a great team and have people that, to the engineers that you're going to want to work with and build something you're going to be proud of and not be embarrassed by. And that we can actually on day one, and we are on day one, we're going to, super secure household name financial services companies and other very privacy focused organizations. And they're quite willing to play with us because, from day one, we went and built the thing that was at the level that they needed. But that's why we had to raise so much money. Yeah.
And how did the idea come to you? How did the idea develop?
Because history just repeats itself. Yeah. So, the API thing was, there was this concept of the API, but I was a biz dev guy. I couldn't use it to connect my business to other businesses because we were lacking this infrastructure connectivity. And so I went looking for it. I couldn't find it. And then, a couple of years ago, I'm doing all this reading about AI in the enterprise. And once again, there's all this, it's this geeky thing that AI can do, but the ordinary business folks are kind of being left out because most people don't do their jobs by chatting with a PhD all day. They actually go and do things with tools and, create work product. And the AIs weren't really able to do that as effectively because they weren't able to connect to all the different tools that we as humans use. Yeah. So it seemed like I had sort of seen this movie before. Yeah. And crafting that story, and raising money is storytelling. I crafted that story. And the first person I had to convince was my head of product for Mashery, because he wanted to really understand that there was a real need, that it wasn't just redoing something that already existed. Yeah. And so once I got him sold, then the rest of it was pretty easy because he was sort of the toughest nut to crack. Yeah. And then we sort of put together a story arc, and I took it to a VC who I knew, who met my sort of ideal candidate profile, ideal customer profile for my person I wanted to lead the round. And fortunately for me, he liked the idea and that was on a Friday. He invited me to Zoom to the Monday partner meeting. We got a term sheet on Friday. So it was a week after I had presented to him. Yeah. We then incorporated.
It's so crazy. Yeah, it's amazing.
Due diligence was, here's our formation documents. And, they wired a bunch of money to a bank account that I was a signatory on, which always blows my mind that people do that. But they did, and we started hiring.
Yeah. And what was it like to get the team together again? Because you have...
Well, I got some team together, but we're not getting the band back together. So we're 22 people. I think 5 of them are folks I've worked with before, maybe 6. And that was intentional. I could not find in my old folks that I worked with everybody I needed. And in fact, I really wouldn't want to. Yeah. I want to bring in, the best and the folks who have the specific knowledge of this, not that. But also, I don't want there to be a culture in the company of these are the sort of the cool kids that all work together and you're sort of the new, that doesn't work. Yeah. And so we really have, we are a group of people, some of whom, some of them I know better than others, but that doesn't really affect how the company culture is developing. And it's developing a different culture. We're a we have an office here in New York. We have an office in Oakland, products in Oakland, commercials here, but the engineers are scattered all over the U.S. and Canada. In Mashery days, everybody was under one roof.
Yeah.
And then we had a New York office as well. We were basically on Market Street in San Francisco. And it was a very different kind of culture.
And what does that mean for you in terms of travel? Are you going back and forth?
Not back and forth as much. We do every 2 months, we get everybody together somewhere. The last one we did actually, we did one in Minneapolis in August, I think it was. So it was two ago, because that is one of the few airports that has a nonstop flight to everywhere I have an employee. So we did it there, and a friend of mine runs a company there, and she has a lot of extra conference rooms and such we were able to borrow. So it was great location. And then we're doing one in Oakland at our Oakland office in January, later this month.
Minneapolis in August is probably nice.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
I many startups ago went to Minneapolis for a lot of work, and was so shocked at what a great
it's amazing
place it is, and the arts community is incredible.
It's lovely. Yeah, but at Mashery, Best Buy was one of our biggest customers. So I was back and forth there all times of the year. I got to know Minneapolis in the winter and summer. It was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate you kind of going into this, because again, like I literally, I'm like, how did they do that?
Yeah. It's look, I am fortunate. I have had success, and I built a bunch of these relationships, and I can generally tell a decent story. And we happen to be in a fairly frothy environment for anything that says AI on it, but also we're unusual compared to a lot of AI companies because we're raising tens of millions, not tens of billions. And so there's a group of VCs who want to play in this area, but aren't going to be writing OpenAI size checks.
Yeah.
Right. And so, everything when you're looking to raise money, you always want to be sort of right sized for the fund that you're raising from. And so I felt that in terms of sort of foundational infrastructure for how AI is going to develop, that if you sort of look at the foundational models as kind of the IS, the infrastructure as a service layer, and then there are various really cool, but a lot of different kinds of companies in sort of the SaaS layer, the application layer of the AI world, whether it's a legal AI this or visual AI that or whatever, that the sort of platforms, the surface layer in between, there weren't a lot of candidates. And I think we have a really compelling space we're carving out for ourselves. We have a great team, and we have a pretty solid plan of what we're doing and why. And so I felt we'd likely be able to find some investors who wanted to be along for that ride.
Yeah. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about how you've learned sales. Because in our conversations, you've said dropped some tidbits that have been incredible.
Well, and sales is ideally figuring out what you have that you can sell to someone that looks like something they've bought before in a way that they bought it before.
Right.
Right. And that it's right-sized for them and it's right-sized for you. And that once you've made the sale, that you're going to stay friends. Right. And which is important, right? I don't want to be, someone sends me a lot of money, but they're, an asshole. That's not going to be much fun for me. And so, you're just sort of trying to align your story and their story in a way that they mesh. And if you do that, you generally can sell something.
Yeah. But do you know, is this something that you learned from, a position? Is this something?
No, I've always had to sell. So I've run companies in theater, in wine, I've run 3 manufacturing companies. All of these, my job has been the same job.
Yeah.
It's not the sector. I didn't have to be a wine person to sell wine. I didn't have to be a water purification person to sell that, to run those companies. It's, don't run out of money, build a great team, keep your customers happy, don't run out of money. But you find in all of these things, I guess, I've had to learn how to find myself in a situation, often in a new market I didn't know. I was in the lighting industry, residential lighting, and figure out how it works, understand how people buy, and then just sort of figure out how to slot into that.
Yeah.
And it's a puzzle. And you just sort of have to figure it out.
Yeah, I just love you're selling something, you want to qualify your customers.
Always.
And sell something to them.
So I hate wasting time.
That they know how to buy. They've purchased something similar in the past. They have the money already.
Yeah, that was actually one of the hardest things with Mashery was we were very early in software as a service. We were one of the first multi-tenant things people were buying. And these large companies were sending us software license agreements and saying, we want to use our paper. I'm like, well, but that's not what you're buying. You're not buying a license. And they the purchasing folks did not understand that. A lot of these folks, Salesforce existed, but that was about it.
Yeah.
They were used to buying, Oracle.
Right.
And that wasn't what we were selling. Right. And it really confused people for a while.
Yeah, because the more education.
Yeah, now everybody buys SaaS. We all know how to do it. But in 2006, it was kind of bizarre.
Mm-hmm. So when you were reaching out to investors, you said you called up one person.
Yep.
It was very quick.
Yep.
But in our other conversation, you said you were very intentional.
Yes.
About who you were reaching out to.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more
Sure.
about that?
We did not have a demo, and we did not have a product. We did not have a line of code written.
Yeah.
And so there are some folks who are investors, a lot of folks who are very, very product focused. I respect them a lot. They're great, but they need to play with something to really understand it.
Yeah.
They were not a qualified purchaser for the thing I was selling because I didn't have a product, right? So they kind of had to know me enough to believe that I was going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So they had to sort of suspend disbelief there. And they had to have a fund that was correctly sized to lead a round of 10 to 15 million, which means it could not be, a multi-billion-dollar fund where I would get lost in it. And it also couldn't be a fund that, can only write $2 million or $5 million checks either. Right. So you had to sort of size it there. And then it was also important to me, because it was very much selling the story, that there are some funds where it's a very rigorous process, and you have there's a lot of different folks that touch it, and a very large partnership that vote on it.
Yeah.
And I have found that in situations like this, that's harder to get through. What you need a partner who is really driving their firm and driving the partnership in a way that they have the political capital and the sort of the weight with the partnership, that they can come in and say, I believe in this. This is a good thing. We have to do this.
Yeah.
And if it's someone who is in a partnership where they don't have that dynamic, and there are lots of different other kinds of dynamics that could sink it, I would find that it really wouldn't work. So I had a handful of candidates who I felt sort of met those criteria.
Yeah.
And I went to the one that I thought was the most likely first, and it turned out I was right.
And with qualifying those candidates, is that just knowledge that you've gathered over the years?
Yeah, knowledge. It's also knowledge. It's constant conversations. It's I have folks who I trust and who I can talk to about these things and say, I'm thinking of this person and this person, and this person, and here's what I'm looking for. And they'll other VCs who are not necessarily qualified, but no. The thing about venture capitalists is that one of their most important tasks for their portfolio companies is helping you find the next round and helping you find more investors.
Yeah.
And so it is a part of their job to know all the ins and outs of their peers, not just the funds, but the partners, the partnership dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want their portfolio companies wasting time either.
Yeah.
And so the good VCs all know all the stuff about everyone. And so over the course of 2.5 decades, I've built a lot of relationships with folks like that. And I can call them and say, what do you think of this, or who should I be talking to there? And, what's been interesting about this round, it also, so the traditional concept of VC is you find your lead, and once you have your lead and your lead signs up, filling the rest of the round is super easy.
Right.
Because they've got the lead and everybody just sort of slots in. The exact opposite happened this time because the lead was on board, but here was the problem. The problem was that I now had a essentially pre-revenue, pre-product company with a, it was raising 10 to 15. I had 9 in the bank from cross-selling 2 more from a couple other folks. And so I was going out looking for, $1 million, $2 million checks. Most of the funds that write $1 million, $2 million checks, they actually want to lead pre-seed rounds.
Yeah, they want
right?
Yeah.
And they want to own 10% of the company or 20% of the right? That's their model.
Right.
So I actually didn't fit the model of the follow-on folks. I got a bunch of, 500 here, 250 there, but finding and filling in that the sort of second half of that round took a lot longer and was a lot more work because I was selling them something they weren't used to buying.
Yeah.
Right. So the 100 and 200,000 folks, they could get there because they're used to being, on the cap table, but they're not. They don't, they're not
on a board
seat.
Yes.
They're not any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But when you start going to the folks who can write those bigger checks, they have expectations, and and their LPs have expectations.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't really anticipated that, but in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. I was selling something that was different than what they were used to buying.
Yeah. So how long did that part take?
I think I did my final close in April, March or April, something like that. So it took 5 months.
Yeah.
And it was, we were doing other stuff during. I was not just raising the whole time, but But what was nice about it was I had these lovely new investors at Crosslink, and they introduced me to a bunch of, it was the same thing. I'm like, I need people who can write $1 million or $2 million check and don't demand a board seat and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And because they're good VCs, they had a Rolodex full of them. And I got to talk to them and brought a bunch of them on board. And so most of the investors that I worked with on this are not the ones I worked with on Mashery, because there are a few that came on. But most of them, those folks are used to buying something different. Mm-hmm. They're used to buying the thing I was selling, back then, not the thing I'm selling today. Yeah.
So a year, maybe a little bit more, has gone by since you raised, like you get first close.
Yep.
Are you thinking about the next round already?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Were you thinking about that in April of last year?
That was part of my, well, so, and let me explain why. Yeah. So the VC game is, I have a company, I have an idea of this thing here. And this is what it looks like today. And if you give me your X dollars, right, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to take this thing from here to there. And we all agree that if I get it there, someone else will come along and give me more money at a higher valuation to take it somewhere else. I don't have to know where the somewhere else is yet. I have to before I raise that.
Yes.
Right? But I have to be able to tell you a story that takes me from here to there in a way that is sufficiently plausible and likely that these folks will give me that money.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do. So when I was raising back then, I had to have a plan of what my next raise was. Now, when I get to that place, that's when I will figure out what the next one is, right? I don't need to do that today.
Yeah.
But when I do that next raise, absolutely. And when I did this one, I had to know what that one was.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hiccups in this process were getting the rest of the round.
Yeah, that was certainly the part that took a bunch of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it feel like, I guess when you raised in 99, was it 99? You raised a couple million then.
When I first raised in 99 for WineBid, I raised a $4 million round. And the reason you did that then was the first $1 million went to Sun for 2 servers. The second $1 million went to Oracle for some software. You had a $500,000 that went to Cisco for the router.
Yeah. Wow.
You had a $500,000 for miscellaneous stuff and the down payment on a quarter cage.
Yeah.
A quarter rack in a cage. And then you hired a sysadmin. And then you could start coding.
Yeah.
Right? All of the stuff I just described is now free.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't like start something like this with no money back then. And then when we did Mashery, by that time, Sun realizing this, that they started giving their servers away for free to startups. And I got to know the CEO of Sun by then. And so I started Mashery, and he wanted to give me big pile of free servers, but AWS had just started EC2. I'm like, your free servers are more expensive than paying Amazon for this new cloud thing. So we didn't do that. We never looked back.
Yeah. It's interesting to see, the startup costs for actual hardware, and it was incredible. And now, I was going to ask if it feels like you're playing with funny money because it's 13 million, but it's really, you're also paying for talent.
It's entirely talent. Well,
Yeah,
well
talent
also all of the Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all give you a 6-figure credit for their cloud the moment you raise money, right?
Yeah.
As long as you can say I've raised money from a VC, they're like, here, take our stuff for free.
Yeah.
And so it's we certainly don't have a fancy office, right? It's entirely the talent.
Yeah.
It's the talent. It's, occasionally moving them around so I'm in the same place, and that's about it.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who don't have a long career and lots of relationships who are going out to raise?
Well, so, certainly what I'm seeing, and I advise a lot of companies, I sit on boards, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Certainly, if you haven't done this before, your world will look closer to my $100,000 priced round than to 13.5 out the door, unless you might have done something else. But it's unusual to be fresh out of school and not have a bunch of connections and raise an 8-figure seed round on a napkin. But the advice is, number one, understand what the story arc is. It's always it's theater, right? You have an audience, and when the audience comes into the performance, they're feeling a certain way, they're knowing certain things, and your job is to take them on a journey that takes them to a place where they feel they must be part of the thing you're doing. So understand, you're not selling a product, you're selling a company, you're selling a vision. That vision is you, it's not on a deck. If people are staring at your deck, they're not staring at you, and they're investing in you.
Yeah.
When Josh gave me the $100,000 back in 2006, and I had a deck, and he basically said, thanks for the deck. Now I know what you won't be doing. Because no one does what's in their deck.
Right.
I'm investing in you figuring out what you're actually going to do. This was great. And maybe some of this will remain. But what he was investing in was a belief that I and the people around me would, figure out how to do a kind of difficult thing and survive. And get to a place where you have, where he and the other investors get back their money and a bunch more.
Yeah. I think what was interesting to me was this idea of I've got to raise 10 to 15 million or it's a no-go.
Right. Yeah.
And if it hadn't happened, what was the timeline you were giving yourself to understand if it could happen or not?
3 months, maybe. I mean, fundraising is not it shouldn't be a lengthy process. It's especially not at the seed stage. It's you either get there or you don't.
Yeah.
So, if you're sort of kicking around for a year, having meetings for a company that doesn't exist yet,
yes.
You're probably not. It's probably not a good use of your time.
Yeah.
So, I think it was more, it's also somewhat seasonal. I started these calls in September. Fundraising is most easily done in fall and in, February, March, April, when folks are paying attention.
Yeah.
Holidays, not a great time. Summer, not a great time.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't happen. It does. I mean, but it's certainly, particularly if you need someone to move quickly, they need to have their lawyers around and their whole partnership there and not traveling. The partner meeting has to happen and, and, right? So you kind of want to do it when folks are around. So I figured if I got into, Thanksgiving and Christmas of last year, it was probably not going to be terribly successful.
Yeah. And was there, I know you're very busy, but was there another idea that you would have been working on if not this?
I had not anticipated starting another company.
Yeah.
That was not something I was necessarily, thrilled I did. I'm having a blast. But it wasn't that I was looking to start a company. don't know that usually works well. Saying, I'm going to start a company. What company should I start? Is not a way to build passion and drive around a thing that you feel you can't not do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to feel you can't not do it.
Right.
And then if you feel that, then you probably are onto something.
So how did you have to reorganize the rest of your life to make room for Barndoor?
Well, fortunately, I've been doing this for a while. My kids are grown and gone, so they're not, I don't have those responsibilities day in, day out. I've for quite some time, I've been doing a lot of board work and advisory stuff, and I've dialed that back a bit. But it's really, post-COVID, it's a very different thing. I don't have 50 people in an office here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I work a lot, but I also carve out time. I have a very understanding wife who's very supportive of what I'm doing. And
it's really important.
that's very important.
Yes.
And she's an entrepreneur herself, and she's done this before herself. And so she gets what it's all about.
Yeah.
She's also very technical. She thinks it's a good idea, which helps. But it also sort of evolves. I mean, it's like I start noodling on the idea with a couple of folks, and then I start, I call Eric, and then suddenly we have a term sheet, then there's this rush, and then the money comes in. And the thing about my role, I'm not hands on keyboard. I don't code. Mm-hmm. So in the early days, I was helping hire, right? And I was still going around and raising some more money, but until I had something to sell
mm-hmm.
and build a commercial team around, it was not the all-in thing. So it sort of brings you along. It's not like, day zero, you're lol on the beach, and day one, you're, full speed ahead. That's not the way these things develop.
Yeah, I clearly, but I would think that yes, you didn't have anything to sell, but it's like the moment that wire hits,
mm-hmm.
to me, it was almost like you're full on.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for the first month, we were cash flow positive.
Yeah.
With the interest.
Yeah.
And then that changed really quickly. But yeah, it was, and there's a lot of stuff that consumes you when you do these things.
Yeah.
That if you've done these a few times, are not so hard. Mm-hmm. So, as a entrepreneur CEO, the one perk you have, there's two. One is the office is a block from my apartment.
Right.
The other one is that when you hire someone, you basically are allowed to carve off half of what you do and give it to that person. Mm-hmm. And you sort of keep doing that, right? And you should carve off the stuff you either hate doing or suck at, or both.
Yeah.
And so I have a co-founder, Kirsten Spaljarek, who I've done every company with, who does all the HR and sort of runs the joint in terms of the operations of the company. I will never do a company without her. By carving that stuff off, and she's done this a gazillion times, it's like autopilot for her.
Yeah.
And, I have an amazing recruiter I worked with for years, since the Mashery days. And so, he can find anyone anywhere. And so, we sort of had these folks that we knew, and we just sort of, attorneys, the legal stuff, I've done this enough times. Mm-hmm. These are not difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And so banking and all that stuff is super easy.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it kind of rolls up gently, and then you find yourself, in a pretty intense thing.
Yeah. What kind of support do you get from your investors other than money?
So, I have gotten, Crosslink has been amazing at customer intros. In fact, they all are. But
wonderful.
But Crosslink has, so they run this thing called Alpha, which is this networking group that I've been a part of for a long time. That's how I met Eric at Crosslink in the first place. And so they've got thousands of companies, and they actively maintain those relationships.
Yeah.
So as we announced what we were doing and they started doing it, I've gotten amazing intros to the right person at the right company, time after time, at the right time. So they've been tremendous that way. So that's been great. On my board is Rob Hayes, is a very close friend of mine. He's a board partner at First Round Capital, former, led the seed rounds at Uber, very, very successful VC, lives here in New York. I see him all the time. I talk to him every week. And it's just, advice on stuff. And, he knows me very, very well. We've been friends for 20 plus years. Had dinner last night, actually. And I just get a lot from him. And then the rest of them, they're giving me intros. They actually don't know this, but they're going to be testing some software for me in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Be sending stuff out and saying, you should go through this process and tell me what you think. But, there are varying degrees of them. And, some of them make promises that they don't deliver on. And, some of them say, we've got all these companies and I've heard nothing. And others have really punched above their weight and they've written a modest check, but have been incredibly valuable in terms of the kinds of intros they're doing. So that's what they've done so far. When I do raise my next round, I will expect that I'll get some good intros from these folks.
Yeah.
And that, again, they'll be part of the story of, this team told me they were going to do these things.
Yeah.
They went and did these things. And so when they tell you they're going to do those things, you probably should believe them, right?
Yeah.
That would be incredibly valuable if I
Pre-sales job.
Yeah, if I can get them to do that for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the things I think is so incredible with good investors is really opening the doors to new customers.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I don't need them to refer me to lawyers. I don't need them to recruit for me. I don't need them to, they all have the discount programs. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like saving money on HubSpot. But it really, most of the so-called value add that a lot of these firms set up, they're sort of looking at the Y Combinator model and saying, gosh, they're almost becoming incubators.
Yeah.
And for an experienced entrepreneur, that's not valuable. But I don't know all the current people and all the current jobs at all the big companies. They do.
Yeah.
That is incredibly valuable to me.
Yeah. Excellent. How has your leadership evolved since Mashery?
I think it would be a better question for the folks who worked with me there and are working here. But I probably delegate better than I used to. But I will say it's interesting. I'm actually more involved in the product this time than I was then. I'm not a product person. I'm a terrible product person. But I really do have a feeling that I understand how to tell the story of the product that we're building. So it's not that I know how to build the product or what the features need to be, but I know that I need to be able to say the product does these things and can do those things in order to be able to tell my story. And so I've actually been a little bit more involved in the product realm. And then the other way it changes is just, some of the tools and then the needs change. So, we didn't have Slack back then. Slack is a very different kind of way of communicating. We had IA, we all had AIM accounts, but it's not the same.
Right.
And so, that's a very different way. We didn't have, obviously, the AI at our disposal.
Yeah.
So, it used to be that you'd have senior engineers and then you'd have a bunch of junior engineers who sort of churn things out that the senior engineers told them to do and did the sort of a lot of the routine programming. Those jobs don't exist anymore for folks like this. That's all AI.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't have, the engineers we have are all, super, super experienced and senior folks. And that's a little bit of a different, we had a few of those folks at Mashery, but we also had a lot of, folks who were not that far along in their careers. It's a different kind of company. And then, of course, the remote thing is different as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I started one of my companies, I remember a lot of senior people that were my friends and colleagues wanted to help.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to do the work.
Right.
They wanted to do the strategy.
Yeah.
And I guess now with AI, in some cases, AI, like some of the AI tools have solved that problem.
Well, they have. They have. Yeah, absolutely. And also they also allow people who are more maybe even mid-career to punch above their weight. So you're a really, really strong, person in role X, and you can have a coach essentially through AI that basically says, you sort of say where you are, what you're doing, who you are, and what you're able to do. And, okay, here's the world. What do I focus on today? What things should I be anticipating? And you can have that kind of, gain some of that knowledge through use of these tools that I think really can be very helpful.
Yeah, I think one thing I found very helpful with using AI was identifying blind spots.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, here's who I am. Here's what I do. Now, come at me and be contrarian. What am I missing?
Yep.
What am I not seeing?
Yeah.
What am I not self-aware about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's pretty good.
It is, and it's and they're so polite. They don't make you feel bad.
Yeah. Sometimes I tell them to be meaner, because they are too nice sometimes.
They are too nice sometimes. Indeed.
Yes, I don't know.
They're also so very apologetic when they screw up.
Sometimes they hallucinate as well, which makes me unhappy. But do you have any hot takes on AI and the startup ecosystem right now?
Hot takes. Look, it's I think the biggest thing about AI right now is moving so quickly and is moving so slowly. And so you have a lot of noise and a lot of amazing technology developing.
Yeah.
But all this stuff about the 95% of projects fail, blah, 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 right? It's because people still haven't caught up with figuring out what to do with it other than to have these chats. And so we now all have really, really great executive coaches, thanks to these things.
Yeah.
Right. But that's different than fundamentally changing how companies do business. And I think that until the AIs are able to be instructed to and trusted to actually do stuff, it's not nearly as transformative as some might hope. And so part of what we're hoping to catalyze is exactly that by providing the guardrails and providing the ability to actually let these very, very powerful but not non-deterministic pieces of software that can go off and do wacky stuff, allow them to actually do useful things for you.
With oversight.
With rules. Yeah. With rules and oversight.
Yeah.
I liken them to enthusiastic interns. And they're very, very
Really
enthusiastic,
smart,
and they really want to do a good job, but they don't have context. And if you tell them to do something, they just do something that's like, what on earth made you think that? They're interns.
I will also, as someone who is a trained coach, and I understand that I can be replaceable, is some of the benefit of.
And I have a great coach too.
Some of the benefit of the coaching with high-level executives is literally the appointment.
Oh yeah.
And the time set aside.
Absolutely.
For reflection or venting or problem solving or whatever it is, or even just being human.
Yeah. But the appointment, I'm writing the check too, right?
Yeah.
It's if you're writing the check, you want to get some value out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of my clients, I'm there to be allow them to be human for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's wild. So while I see this great resource, I have to go to it to give it permission to coach me. And I might not do that on a weekly basis. Right.
Yes. You have to actually make it a part of your day.
Yeah. Like I should be making meditation a part of my day, and I don't.
I've heard that.
I don't do that. Yeah. I fall asleep too easily.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Like
I tried it.
Have me sit down and close my eyes and I'm out.
Yep.
How do you stay mentally, emotionally, and physically in top form, healthy, while you're running a startup?
I'm fortunate I don't get sick often. It's every couple of few years. So that's actually just very fortunate. I don't know why. I enjoy a martini at the end of the day. That's probably part of it. But no, I certainly I absolutely credit my wife, who is wonderful in keeping me happy and sane and balanced.
Yeah.
But it's also it's the team you bring together. Again, you try to bring folks on board who are good at things that you're not, particularly as an executive, because if Like if I think I'm reasonably good at marketing. Maybe it's delusional, but I believe that. And so if my marketing person isn't better at it than I am, we're both going to be miserable, right? If your co-founders are the same profile as you, then you're not sort of successfully solving all the problems, right? So I have some strengths and I've got a lot of weaknesses. And I've got really, really amazing people who come up behind me and make sure the weaknesses don't kill the company.
Yeah.
And so with that, by putting together that kind of team, that allows me to relax and feel that I'm involved. And then I do have things outside of the company. I have friends. I still am involved in Broadway and theater stuff, and we travel. So it's, it is definitely, I've got family, I've got my kids and grandkids, and it's just a matter of having all those things. I do exercise, but it's it's I think it's just that I sort of enjoy my life.
Yeah. Have you ever felt that by being involved in the arts, also in a producing way, has that ever taken, because for instance, when I started a company that was surrounding a love of mine, I just found that I was working all the time, even when I was doing the thing that I absolutely loved.
Right. And
it kind of ruined it for me.
So I learned that back when I was in the wine business.
Yeah.
So I was not a wine, passionate about wine. I liked wine, but it was not a thing for me when I got in. Virtually everyone in that business is very into wine.
Yeah.
And most of the people who stay in it, they realize it becomes a business. Yeah. And, it as such, they either get out and continue to enjoy wine, or they stay in and it really isn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
And so I've definitely found that I have not since, my first job out of business school was full-time running a nonprofit theater. I did it for a year and I got it out of my system and I realized that was not for me. I didn't enjoy the job.
Yeah.
And I was not really enjoying the theater.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got out and since then, that was in 89. Since then, I still enjoy it very much. I enjoy the people. I enjoy being around it. But, I'll go and I'll sit at the back of a, Broadway theater during tech and watch all the stuff going on. It's amazing. It's just, there's nothing like it.
The talent is
incredible. The talent and the complexity and all that stuff.
Yes.
But it's not what I do every day.
Yeah.
And it's not what I do all day. And so, so I can continue to marvel at the fact that I get to sit there and do that.
Yeah.
But I look at my friends and producing partners who are there, 20 hours a day during tech, and I don't think they're having the kind of fun I'm having by being there, right? And so, they're passionate. They love theater. Yeah. But it's really hard work.
Yeah, and they're also noticing when something goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I do agree that this follow your passion and turn it into your job. I've never really believed that because it's exactly as you say. You lose both the passion and you realize it's not even a great job. Yeah. And there are some people for whom that's how they're wired and they have to do that. As I said earlier, I'm a generalist. For me, running a company is pretty much the same experience in wine, in theater, in, AI and APIs. Wine had better parties. Theater's got really good parties too.
Yeah, that's here.
But the AI world, not so much. But other than that, it's really, it's don't run out of money, take care of your customers, get a good team, respect them, blah, 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 right? And so I am a generalist in that respect. And I'm able to be a generalist in businesses that work commercially, not in businesses that are passions of mine.
Yeah.
If I was a specialist and not a generalist, then perhaps that would be different.
Yeah. This has been wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
No, I enjoyed this very much. And by by all means, check out Barndoor AI if you are looking to have your AIs actually do something.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming in.
Great to be
Having
here.
conversations like this really help other founders understand what's possible. And, that's why I was really hammering like, yeah, but how? Because not everyone can raise on an idea.
No,
right?
and
Yeah.
I talked to a couple of young, very earnest founders a couple weeks ago who found me, and
Yeah.
they want to raise 10 million, and they haven't written a line of code yet, and they were contemplating pitching one of the actually two of the investors I'd worked with, and I didn't say you can't do it. I said you might be able to,
Yeah.
but your experience will be different than mine because we're different.
Mm-hmm.
I have this experience and these advantages that allowed me to do it this way.
Yep.
You may have a way that we will be successful, but it will not be the way that I did it because you're, when I raised money for Mashery, I don't even know if you were alive yet, right? So, it's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's absolute. I love it. So thank you again.
Yep.
And I'm Helena Fogarty, and this was Inside the Round.